And now we'll be taking a look at 3D Cursor. 3D Cursor has many different uses, but the first use that we have for 3D Cursor is adding objects. Whenever we add objects, those are added at the 3D Cursor. By default, you can see our 3D Cursor is at the origin of our 3D world. Just going to get rid of this object, and then we're going to add a plane object, and you can see that it's added there at the 3D Cursor. Now to move the 3D Cursor, you can select this 3D Cursor tool on the toolbar and then simply left click. Or a better way of doing this would be holding down Shift key and then right clicking. That's going to be more easy. And now if we go ahead and add a cube object, you can see how it's added at the 3D Cursor. But then we also have some other uses. For example, if I shift right click there to move my 3D Cursor, now we can go to this object menu, and then under snap we have this same menu, but I like to use keyboard shortcuts, so Shift S is going to give you that same menu. This is called a pie menu, and it's easier to sort of select these different options. So we have things like snap cursor to the grid. So what it does is that it's going to find the nearest point for the 3D cursor and snap it to that sort of intersection of the grid. So let's shift right click here. In this case, this is going to be the intersection for this 3D cursor. So Shift S and then cursor to grid. Actually, our 3D cursor is up there in the sky. So let's shift right click here. It's a little hard to sort of get it right because this sort of 3D space. Okay, now it should sort of snap to this point. So let's snap, and you can see it snaps there. Now that this was just to sort of demonstrate this, it usually works better if you have objects close by. So if we shift right click, you can see that it's going to be like here. And now let's say that I want to move it to this intersection. I can just click here and it's going to move there. The next option that we have is cursor to world origin. It's going to snap it back to our 3D world. Next we have cursor to selected, and this moves it to the origin of the selected object. So if I select this object, it's going to move to this origin of this object. So Shift S, cursor to selected, and it's going to see snap there. This is helpful in edit mode. For example, if I want to add new object on this vertex point, I can go ahead and select it and then press Shift S and then select cursor to selected. It's going to move my 3D cursor there, and then I can press Shift A and I can add new objects like this sphere. And then maybe I want to scale it down. So you can see how easy it was for me to like add it exactly what I wanted. If I didn't have this 3D cursor function, then I would add it and then I would move it here, so it would have taken a lot more time. And then we have some other options like cursor to active. This is going to move it to the active selection. So if you have multiple objects selected, in this case, this is going to be the active selection. So we can click here and it's going to snap there. Now we have some opposite uses of this. For example, if I have my 3D cursor over there and I want to move my selected object there, I can press Shift S and then I have selection to cursor, and it's going to snap it over there. If I have multiple objects selected and I do the same thing, you can see it's going to mess it up a little bit because it's going to snap both objects to the 3D cursor. So if that's not something that you want and you want to keep that offset of the objects, then you can press Shift S and then you can move selection to cursor but keeping offset. And then we have some more things like selection to active. This basically moves your selection to the active point, and then you have selection to grid. So again, it's going to find the nearest point or interact in this sort of intersection of the 3D grid to snap your selection there. So in this case, that sort of point was there. Let's go ahead and select this object and sort of scale it down so we can see it better. So now it's going to sort of snap to this point over here. So snap selection to grid, just like that. Now these tools are helpful both in object mode and edit mode. So you can see that the 3D cursor has many different uses. And in addition to that, you can also sort of combine it with your transform pivot point options. For example, if I have this object up here and I want to sort of rotate it around this origin point of the world, by default, if I try to rotate, you can see that it's rotating over there. But if I go ahead and change it to 3D cursor, and now you can see that I'm able to sort of rotate that around here. So that makes it really easy and quick. So that's how you can use 3D cursor inside Blender.